It's the return of Bob Pollock. We were so concerned last week when Bob wasn't here, and he's still not here, but he's at least within the borders of Indiana County. He's in the Smicksburg area. Phoning in this morning. You can call Bob at 479-1160. Ask him your questions about lawns and gardens and plants and bugs and whatever else you want. What are you doing in Smicksburg? A program for farmers?
Yes, actually we are.
Oh.
We're doing a farm food safety training, and it's the official training that's required by federal law now. With the passage of the Food Safety Modernization Act a couple of years ago, of course, you pass the law, and then they have to write all the regulations for it. So they've pretty much gotten that done, and the playing field is pretty much in place for people to know what they have to, who has to comply, and all that good stuff.
So
we started doing trainings.
Yeah.
The Produce Safety Alliance, which was set up by the law, is based out of Cornell University, and they were charged with writing all the manuals and the training materials that will be taught across the country. So we have one set of manuals, one set of training resources that are used by everybody that's doing training across the country. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And then on top of that, with the plain community, many times we can't use the typical audio visuals or PowerPoint presentations that we might with other audiences. So had to create some other training materials that are acceptable to the way they receive training. So we're actually piloting today some of those materials that have been developed by Dr. Luke Laborde, who is a food scientist at Penn State, and some other folks that were able to get a grant to help put these materials together, and then we'll see how it goes today and evaluate that, and then if things need tweaked, then we can do that, and then that will then probably become kind of the set of training materials that could be used, anywhere in the country at that point.
Yeah. See, I was wondering about that because you're on an Amish farm here this morning talking to, among others, Amish people, and I was going to say you probably can't use the typical materials that you would because you're limited by the lack of electricity and some other strictures. So you've had to work around that, and actually, is the presentation that you're making today is that something that is a model that you set up or that you did adapting somebody else's model?
Well, it's primarily they've taken instead of showing pictures, actually it's going to be more of a flip chart type of presentation. So you might have line drawings, black and white characterizations of what would have been in a picture, or if it was a photograph taken of tools or equipment or produce, then that's been kind of translated into a kind of a flip chart manual and actually what we're going to be doing is like two people will share one set of resources, and they'll be able to sit beside each other at a table, and then we'll be able to go through. They'll have the slides there, except they'll be on paper, and then we'll be flipping through those for each of the required. There's 7 required sections that are in the training, and it's a full day. It's a full 7 hours of training.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I think probably a lot of people didn't realize was that you have to deal with those sorts of things. Hey, we have a caller this morning who's going to bring a question to you. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. I've been hearing something about the lantern fly, and I wondered if that's something that we need to be concerned about out here in western Pennsylvania, and if so, if Bob could enlighten us about its life cycle, et cetera, et cetera.
Mr. Pollock, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that has been, up until now, that has been primarily, we've kind of ignored that. But what is happening is its area has expanded in the last couple of years. It was started down in very southeast Pennsylvania, but they have continued to expand the counties that are under quarantine and really do all the travel. There's a lot of travel every day, easily from here to Philly and back, and in proximity to not only human people traveling in vehicles, but we have trains and all those kind of transport systems and trucking that go on. And this pest has the ability to move around. So it can, somewhat similar to the gypsy moth, and we got to go back into the 80s to where that really spread and came into our area, and we can still see places where oak trees were affected by the gypsy moth. Well, this one lays, we have an adult moth, very colorful, very pretty moth that can fly around, and it doesn't really fly long distances, but it can land on things and hitch a ride on things. It also lays egg masses, and they're not the same coloration or anything, but similar to the way gypsy moth laid egg masses on trees and on campers and vehicles and all that kind of stuff. So, yes, we do need to be concerned about it. And we've pretty much been told by Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture it's coming. And that we need to be thinking about it, learning about it, and be ready to deal with it when it comes.
What sort of harm is it going to cause in terms of the damage that it will inflict?
So the larva is a sucking insect, so it's going to remove plant sap from a variety of species. And we've talked before about Ailanthus, tree of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a couple callers, how do we get rid of tree of heaven? And it's a challenge to do that because it resprouts. You can cut the tree down and it'll resprout and keep on going. That tree is one of the main species that the spotted lanternfly is attracted to.
Okay.
So that's not good because we have that scattered all over the place.
Oh, so we weren't saying, okay, the lanternfly is going to get rid of the tree of heaven and solve that problem, and then we'll deal with the lanternfly. It's not that case at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It attacks them, and so from a predator perspective, that is a positive thing because that is a weedy tree. It's an invasive species. The downside is we get this insect that also can attack a lot of other trees too. And they've started to find that it's a problem in orchards and on fruit trees because it'll come in and land, and then if there's some feeding done, then they'll excrete sugary sap, and then we'll get sooty mold growing on there. So it may not be a direct pest of the plant, but just this whole sooty mold, or the secreting the honeydew, which is sugar, so they've fed on the plant, and then they get their nutrients from it, pass it through their insect bodies, and then we get this sugary sap come out, and then that becomes a nice place for mold to grow. And so you get fruit and vegetables that have this sticky substance on them, and then on top of that, black areas all over it from the mold growing on it, so it can affect the quality of the produce.
Now, just a couple of moments left here.
It's a huge nuisance, too.
Yeah.
These things they've found this past year, they were swarming, and they might just completely plaster a whole side of a house or and it just makes it very difficult to be outside when you get that many of them around.
Yeah. All right.
But
so
the point is,
yeah.
we'll have to talk about this another day, and we'll get into more detail. And there are a number of groups that are, including the Master Gardeners, are kind of gearing up and learning about that to help disseminate information about that in the coming months here. So
yeah.
We'll have much more on that.
All right, so that'll be a topic for another program probably in the very near future, because we want to get that question really solved. And meanwhile, you're going to do your program there today. Are we ever going to see you in the year 2018 back here in the studio?
Yeah, hopefully next week I'll be able to be there in person.
You're going to favor us with your presence.
Yes.
All right. Robert, thank you so much. Have a good time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. It's Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank on WCCS AM 1160 and FM 101.1.